Let's talk about this. Also, we want to talk about January 6th as well. Former federal prosecutor and legal expert Doug Burns is joining us. Doug, good to see you. You have been kind of tweeting about this. I've been seeing on Twitter. You have some thoughts. What does it say, you think, for, I guess, the state of Washington, especially the state of the Republican Party? It's been, what, 4 days now? Congress can't even get started. They can't be sworn in until a speaker is chosen. What do you think the American people are saying about this?
Well, I think it's very, very interesting because you're right. I mean, you can characterize it in all kinds of different ways. And, you talk about Twitter and the dialogue, and you do see things from both directions. Obviously, on the one hand, you have the immediate argument, as you just said, which is the American public wants to see the House of Representatives, get down to work and roll up their sleeves and attack things like inflation and the border crisis and so forth. But then the converse argument is, oh no, this is how democracy should work. It's like seeing the sausages made, the old cliche. And it's certainly great to have, vibrant debate and all of that. So again, the truth is somewhere in the middle, obviously. I happen to think that they really do need to get down to work. But at the same time, if it takes a little bit longer to select the speaker, so be it. I mean, we also have historical references being thrown around, the first time since the 1920s. And now I think we may be even farther back, to the 1850s in terms of how many votes it's taking to do this. But I'll say this. I think I'm seeing in the crystal ball, so to speak, but it's not my wisdom. It's what I'm kind of hearing and digesting. I think there's a shot that tonight will be the night, actually, because during the day today, he did make a lot of progress, as you were saying.
Yes, that's what our Fox sources are telling us as well. And senior GOP leadership aides have said as much to some of our reporters on Capitol Hill that they expect it will be clinched tonight. Yes, Doug, the historical, I guess, trivia is somewhat fun, but to the American people, does this look like disarray? I mean, the reason this has not happened so much in our nation's history is because you've had very, powerful leaders in the parties, especially there in the House, who can wrangle their members, who can, put the boot down and control them where we don't see these fights happen, at least within parties themselves, like we're seeing within the Republican Party. So there's definitely this, I guess, chaos caucus, if you will, holding things up. Is that healthy? Is that, like you said, democracy is messy? Yes. Is it in the making, in the offing?
No, I appreciate you doubling back to ask me that, because the point I'm trying to make is that, you have that argument about democracy being messy, and then you have the argument about how, we need to get down to work. But I was remiss, my bad, as they say, in not giving you where I come out on it, which is I'm much more aligned with you need to get down to work, and that this disarray is no good, and that the American public doesn't want to see this. You talk about Twitter, that's what I had tweeted out a couple of times saying, look, the American public wants to see the House of Representatives get down to work. We do not want to see more bickering and fighting. But to your point, which is such a good one, Andrew, about why is this happening now versus in the past, I think you're really onto something. And I think what you were suggesting to fill it out is that in the past, you would have had, a lot of this stuff would have been worked out in advance is the key, okay? And so grievances would have been aired, requests for concessions would have been made, but by the time they walked out onto the floor to do the vote, the stuff would have been resolved. So what's unfortunate, and this is exactly why I come out where I come out, is that the work of the people should be going forward because they should have worked it out in advance. That's my point.
Okay, Doug, let's move on to the 2-year anniversary of January 6th. And you and I and millions of Americans know how horrible of a day that was in our nation's history. I was on the air for, 14 hours, anchoring during the Capitol attack, the riot, and the mob itself. And then, of course, we all remember later that night, all of Congress came back to certify the Electoral College count for Joe Biden. It went to like 2 in the morning, but they did it. They did the work that they had to do that day. So that was somewhat of a silver lining that day. My question to you, though, is we're 2 years on. Is it time to move on? How much does this kind of linger in the collective consciousness of the country? And is it still very, very split among partisan lines here?
Look, I think you have to look at it, in kind of a reasonable context. Both sides, because it's such a highly charged, politically emotional issue, both sides have gotten over the skis, as we like to say. One Hollywood figure, who I won't name, he tweeted out that this was the worst attack on our nation. I mean, that I couldn't disagree with that more, in terms of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and of course 9/11, 2001. So you put it in context. It was a terrible, terrible day. The optics could not possibly be worse. You have this mob descending and breaching into the United States Capitol. Everybody should be in agreement that that's terrible. But again, given the toxic environment, we've been in kind of a cultural civil war over that event, with emotions running really, really high. So to answer your question, which I'm not dodging, I think, on some level, it's time to move on. But at the same time, I think it's important to revisit it certainly every year on the anniversary and reflect back on it. The former president's behavior was very, very, very unfortunate. Saying "we love you" at the end when he finally came out, and allowing the amount of time that he allowed to elapse. So, I try to be reasonable about it. I think it was a terrible, terrible event. I think the president behaved abominably. But at the same time, I think you're right that, there will be some moving on from it.
Yeah. I'm going to answer my own question, too, because in the 2 years since, in the interim, there have been kind of periods of collective reminding of January 6th because the committee just wrapped up their work. They issued their final report. They had hearings, 9 of them, lasting hours at length. And so many had, maybe wanted to move on from January 6th, but it kind of was always popping back up again in the news because of the committee's work. And we both know the kind of the battle royale that went out amongst Democrats and Republicans in the House to see what type of committee would be formed and who would sit on it. And we ultimately knew that it was kind of lopsided, 2 Republicans, the rest Democrats. And so then again, you say, we should maybe be moving on from this, but there's still more and more investigations going, especially the big one at the Department of Justice. Hundreds of people, Doug, have been arrested for their role on January 6th. The trials are still happening. The convictions are still being got. We still don't know an answer yet about what ultimately will former President Trump's criminal liability, if any, would be. You and I were kind of alluding to maybe some of his moral liability and culpability. But these questions are still alive 2 years later.
No, there's no question. I mean, you make a very important point, obviously, which I kind of overlooked for a second, which is, the criminal situation is ongoing. That is not going to, we can't move on from that. It's going to take time to resolve that. That's A. And then B, the Department of Justice, has an investigation. So that's going to continue on. On the political landscape, obviously, the Democrats knew and know that with the House changing majority to Republican, that the focus on the issue is obviously going to lessen to a great, great extent. They knew that. And that's why, they've wrapped up their committee. On the committee, I said to you many times, and I'll repeat it, let's not mix apples and oranges. If I tell people that as a trial lawyer for 37 years, I find it beyond unfortunate to have any proceeding where only sort of one side makes their presentation and you don't get the other side. People are a little too quick to say, oh my God, I can't believe he's defending, Trump or something like that. I never said that. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just saying if you're going to have any proceeding, even one where it's fairly clear that there were lots of problems and liability, you have to have the adversarial process. 2 lawyers or 2 sides butting heads, making the best arguments that they can think of with the facts that are in front of them, that's a good way to start honing and getting toward the truth. So I thought it was unfortunate the way they did it. If you think about it, they would have been so much better off. I told you this one time, and I think it resonated a little with you, which is if you have a really good case, any lawyer is going to tell you, not only do you not object to having the other side there to defend it, you welcome it because you know you're going to prevail with the good case. So actually, now that we have the wisdom of retrospect and a little calm Monday morning quarterbacking, the Democrats would have been much better off having it be sort of adversarial, because I think they probably would have made all of the compelling points that they had.
Yeah. Doug, let's talk about maybe some of the things you and I still, want to figure out, the questions we still have about, what led up to that day, what happened that day, the response, what have you. One of mine, and you've been seeing this a lot today, is this question still has not been answered. Of course, this individual who is suspected of plotting and placing pipe bombs near the headquarters of the RNC and the DNC. Well, there's now, still been no arrests made in this. The FBI has upped the reward to $500,000 for any more information regarding this. So that's an outlying question still. What about you?
There's no question about it. There are a number of questions, and again, I know I sound like a broken record over and over, but the point is, there's two ways to approach an issue like this, or by the way, just a side tangent, or an issue like COVID, for example. The two ways are A, have reasonable debate back and forth, let people give, different opinions, let them raise questions, or B, a little bit of a too hysterical shouting down of opposing viewpoints, which is a shame. So as it applies to January 6th, there are a number of questions. And again, I almost have to be defensive because as I say it, people will be like, oh my God, how can you say that? I mean, that's the way people are programmed. But there are many questions, such as what was the exact landscape in terms of law enforcement and security going into that day, okay? Who asked who for what? Did any politician ask other politicians for help or reinforcements? These are all issues, but again, it's so toxic that the faces redden and they're like, this guy is unbelievable the way he's going against what actually happened. It's really been very interesting for me, quick pontification, as a lawyer who's always dealt in both sides making their points, as I said earlier, and a judge or a jury trying to resolve it. It's very interesting for me to see people just kind of shouting down opposing points. So again, to repeat your point, lots of questions about exactly what took place. The pipe bomber right there, we need to know exactly what happened with that. And we need to know some of the ancillary security questions if we can find those out. But it doesn't change what happened. It was a terrible event, a horrible breach of our Capitol, horrible optics for other countries to see. None of that changes my view. I'm just saying you should have an open-minded approach toward trying to really find out as much as you can about what really took place.
Right. Doug, I reported this earlier, according to U.S. Capitol Police, but in addition to the moment of silence that was held on the Capitol steps today with only House Democrats, there were some protests going on as well. According to the U.S. Capitol Police, there were some arrests made because of those protesters who were illegally blocking traffic. And one of those who was arrested, a woman, 58-year-old Mickey Withoft, the mother, Doug, of Ashley Babbitt, was arrested today protesting. We know Ashley Babbitt. We've seen the video. She was shot and killed inside the halls of Capitol as she, you saw a lunge there towards the speaker lobby. And Ashley Babbitt's, I guess, cause on the very far right has been, kind of into this martyrdom almost. And that is, I think, what, at least in my opinion, we have to remember about those who showed up on January 6th. And there were a lot of them who just attended the rally, the Stop the Steal rally on the Ellipse. But then a lot of those did storm the Capitol. They were our fellow Americans. You were kind of juxtaposing this with other, key points in our nation's history. Pearl Harbor, 9/11. These were our fellow Americans on January 6th. And so it's kind of hard to grapple with.
Oh, no. No, that's a valid distinction for sure. But again, given the unbelievable destruction at Pearl Harbor and 9/11, just in terms, in criminal law, very often, and maybe it's unfortunate, maybe not, we look at, how many people were injured, how many people were killed, in terms of the seriousness. But you make a good point, which is, yes, when our own people are doing that, now you're talking more cultural civil war. Is that a baby step toward an actual civil war? So you make a compelling point. But again, emotions run very, very high. The political stuff can get very, very intense. There's lots of complaints about the way the defendants, have been treated in the case, and I don't need to get all in the weeds on that. But you can get all kinds of hot button rhetoric about people detained there on what, at least in some of the cases, could be characterized as sort of a trespassing theory. And then as the face is red, and they can say, well, how would that type of defendant be treated in New York City, for example? And those are sort of viable points. So the emotions are running high all around. But where I come out is like you, I believe, speaking for you, horrible, horrible event. People have been held to account. There have been hundreds and hundreds of charges and indictments, and it'll be remembered, each time on the anniversary. But I did not like the way the committee handled the matter at all.
Yeah, and of course, Doug, just final point, we'll await Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and, his ultimate decisions on, who to charge, how to charge in the January 6th Capitol riot probe there. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, kind of delegating that work to him, and this could go on for some time. So we'll see what he ultimately decides. We'll see how much, I guess, cooperation between the committee and the probe at the DOJ will be, at least with regards to documents, testimony, media exhibits, and the like. Doug Burns, as always, we appreciate your time. It's good to see you. Just final word on this. I don't want to harp too much on January 6th today. We're 2 years out from it. Final word.
No, the final word is your final word, which is it's going to be extremely interesting to see how the DOJ, through the special counsel Smith, brings this to a resolution in terms of a DOJ matter. That's going to be extremely interesting to watch. Okay, Doug, we appreciate your time. Have a good weekend. We'll talk again. You too. Thank you.